Good day and welcome back. And today we're in the warm-up room where it's a little warmer because it's pretty nasty out. I think the wind chill's about minus 30 right now, so we're going to do most of this in here. Later on we'll move down into the arena and get my helpful assistant to do a little demo. But I want to talk about halters. I did a video on halters quite some time ago and talked a little bit about them and the different kinds and whatnot. And I think I can add to that a bit now. Plus, this was kind of inspired by a recent thread that I was taking part in, and it was interesting the number of different views that people had. There was actually a lot of different opinions on what makes a good halter. And while the conversation was mostly about rope halters, I'm also going to talk a little bit about the web halters too, because I think because they're so common. I think I would be amiss if I didn't address some of the shortcomings of them. And I say that because they actually have more shortcomings than benefits, in my opinion. I don't know. Some of them, like this one, it's got some fairly substantial rings in it, so it's not real bad for strength. Now, this nylon strapping that they use in them, extremely strong, and that stuff's never going to break. But what you got to worry about is these buckles. These pieces here, on some of them, although they look pretty nice. This one doesn't look too bad, but some of them, if you turn them over, they're actually fairly rough on the back side, and you can tell they're actually just a cast piece, and they're not particularly ductile. They don't flex very much. They tend to break. That's the weak link in these things, is these buckles here. And the other problem with these halters is if the horse decides to pull, it displaces the pressure a lot more. It's more like a harness. And if the horse takes a notion to pulling, man, they can really pull with one of these things on. So not good in that respect. They don't, they can break, which in turn teaches the horse that if it pulls hard enough, it can get release. And that's a really bad lesson for a horse to learn. So you don't want that. This one is actually a little better than some, at least on the nose band. It has an adjustment, so you can adjust it. I'll talk a little bit more about that later too, because that's actually a factor in halters as well. Got another one here. It's a little bit better. Actually, again, super heavy duty. There's like triple layer on that. There's no way a horse is going to break that. But again, the weak link is these buckles. Now, this particular one happens to have on the side of it a clip for putting it together. The band that goes over the head is adjustable, like most of them. But that once it's set to fit the horse, you don't use that to do it up. You actually use this little clip. Now, my opinion of that is, if you use it on only one horse, not a big deal. But if you're going to have to use, if you're going to use it on multiple horses, you're going to be adjusting it all the time anyhow. So this is just a waste of time. That's just for lazy people that can't be bothered to do up that very simple little buckle. I don't see the point in these. And one more weak link, in it. This is not a particularly high quality piece. It can break. And the other thing I have seen happen is when they clip on, this piece actually goes on the side of the face, and it faces in towards the horse. And I have actually seen this piece dig into the side of a horse's face and cause injury. It can happen. The option is, if you turn it around, actually do it up backwards, it faces out, it's a lot smoother on the inside. That way it won't hurt the horse, but it has the risk of getting hooked on other things. So all in all, just one more problem, in my opinion, is having these things on a halter. And you generally pay more for a halter that has one of these too. This is not high end, but it'd be mid-range. It's not a super cheap one. In the web halters, you can actually spend a lot of money too. You get show halters. They're made out of leather. They actually aren't as strong, but they can run you up to $100 because they're made out of leather. They look really nice. They're made for showing. I suspect some of the materials are actually a little better quality. But, oh yeah, another weakling. I saw somebody recently, they actually bought the best web halter. Their horse had a habit of pulling, so they wanted to get a really good halter. So they went out and bought the most expensive halter, good brand name. It never did break, but the ring on the bottom the lead was attached, you sure got bent out of shape in a hurry. So they just aren't that great of a thing. We spent a few minutes working with that horse and quickly taught it to stop pulling. Okay, that's enough about web halters. Not a good idea in my opinion. For a well-educated horse in a pinch, you just want to lead the horse around or something like that, they're okay. You can use them. I'm not going to say don't use them at all, but they're certainly, I don't think they're any good for training at all, although I did do most of the training with my little girl in a halter very similar to this one, or no halter at all actually in many cases. So it can be done. I've said before, the halter isn't near as important as the hands at the end of the lead rope. The hands at the end of the lead rope are your ultimate tool. What you got in between is not near as important. But good hands and a good lead rope are probably just as important. Well, the hands are more important than anything. A good lead rope is probably just as important as a halter. But let's go back to halters. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on halters. Now, a lot of people figure, hey, I want to spend the bucks, get a good quality halter, and never have to worry about it. That's okay, as long as you can be sure that you're getting a good quality. But the problem is that price is no assurance of quality either. Now, I got 3 halters sitting here. All 3 are about the same price range. They're all bottom end ones. This one here is actually my favorite one. This is the one I use most of the time, and you'll see it in lots of my videos. This one here, although it looks very similar to that one, this rope is much stiffer. It is actually so stiff, it's actually hard to tie it up. And if you look at the knots are really sloppy on it. The one at the bottom that you're supposed to hook your lead onto, terrible. This is a terrible, terrible halter. It's virtually brand new. I only used it a couple times, did not like it one little bit. It's too stiff. A lot of people like a stiff halter because they figure it gives them better feel. I think there's a happy medium in the middle there, which this one here seems to, I think I found that. This is about the right, it's reasonably stiff, holds its shape, it's not too bad. It's still flexible enough, conforms to the horse. This one here, junk, as far as I'm concerned. Those 2 are both the same price. Actually, all 3 of these are the same price, I think, pretty close, within $1 or so. This one, I have no use for. I keep it around as a spare, though. I already bought it. I'm going to keep it. On the subject of keeping things around, I just want to show. This one's about 7 years old. It was also not a terribly expensive one in its day. It was pink at one time. It's faded to white now. But somebody else used it and used it in a fashion it was not intended to be used, and ended up destroying the outer coating on the rope. But I thought this was kind of neat, though, because it shows you what's inside. And it's actually, there's 2 strands of braided material inside. This halter is actually still plenty strong enough to be used. The outer coating is gone in this one area, but there's actually still enough strength there. It could still be used, but I don't use it, because I just don't think it's a good idea to be using stuff that looks like that. But I keep it around because it is actually still functional, and if I have to, I can use it. And actually, I think it was about 1.5 years ago I did use it last time. But another one here, this is the other extreme, too soft. As you can see it, when you set it down, turns into a pile of spaghetti. It's a mess. It's horrible to try and get on a horse, to get it sorted out and untangled before you can even use the thing. It's an absolute disaster. It's nice and soft. It conforms nice to the horse. It's probably fairly comfortable for the horse when you aren't putting pressure on. So in that respect, it's okay, but I don't like it at all. It's just a really awkward thing to use. It's a mess. It's far too limp. No feel to it at all. But, see, look at that. It's terrible. So, like I said, money isn't necessarily an assurance of quality. You can go out and spend a lot of money. There are clinicians and such that are marketing their own products at ridiculously inflated prices, and implying that if you want to follow their program, you have to use their stuff. And that's not always true. I've walked into stores and saw the exact same product for half the price. However, there are some guys out there that aren't into making a buck. They are trying to provide a service, and selling the products online is actually beneficial, because in some places in the world, rope halters like this are actually pretty scarce. They're hard to get, and sometimes you get stuck with ordering online, and that's what you end up having to do. And if you order from somebody that's reputable, chances are they're not going to be selling you junk. You're going to get a decent halter. You might have to pay a little bit more, but if you stop and work it out, I got 3 of them sitting here. They're all cheap ones. I only got one that I actually like. I ended up buying 3 to get 1. So I could have paid 3 times as much, got a good halter. So, but like I said, I was in a hurry that day. Well, actually, all 3 times. I was just in a hurry, ran into the store, grabbed something, and away I went, and ended up with something I did not like the first 2 times, until I finally got this one. Actually, I've had a couple others in the meantime, but I either give them away or they end up going with horses, or they get left behind when they get moved, or something like that. So we've actually gone through a few over the years. That's one of the reasons I don't like buying particularly expensive ones, because if a cheap one gets left behind, I'm not too worried. If an expensive one gets left behind, I'm going to be a little annoyed. So I don't like investing a lot of money into my tack. Especially if it gets left in a place where somebody else might use it or help themselves to it, because, when you're in a facility where you have a number of boarders, they may have access to your stuff. So that's always an issue too. If you're keeping it at home or keep it in your car with you or something like that, you can afford to spend more money, and it's safe and secure and it's not going anywhere. So, like I said, price isn't necessarily a factor. This one here, it works really good. I like it. How long is it going to last? I don't know, but for $15, who cares? If I get a few years out of it, I've gotten my money out of it as far as I'm concerned. Actually, there is a brand name on it. I'm not going to bother mentioning it, because that's one of those things too, is, when people talk about this halter, that halter, being better quality or lesser quality, it all depends on where you live, because a vast majority of these, in fact, I think all of these are probably locally made. Unless you're buying the big brand names, you're going to get a product that has been locally sourced, because it's generally a little cheaper. So the bottom end stuff in the stores are generally, locally made, and therefore there can be a lot of variation. Even there's one store I used to go to a lot. Every time I went in there, they had different stuff in there. Because they'd get a different supplier, they'd make a better deal with somebody else or whatever. And so, I can't say, I'm not even going to bother mentioning brand names, because what I can get here, you probably can't get where you live, and that sort of thing. But like I said, if you do run into a problem where you can't get any type of assortment or variety or a selection of rope halters, and you have to order one online, don't go for the biggest name, most expensive one, because his halter is probably no better. Oh, and one other thing I was going to mention too is that one of the other variations in the rope halter is that this is the nose band, sets over the nose, and there's one variation called the 4-knot. Now this would be a 2-knot. It's got a knot on each side. The 4-knot actually has 2 more on there, and this sets on top of the horse's nose. And the theory is that it gives you better communication because it provides more pressure points. I think that's completely unnecessary. I used to have one of those actually at one time, and I threw it in the garbage because I just concluded that it was pointless. Because if you use the halter properly, those are completely unnecessary. There's no advantage to them, and the risk of accidentally hurting the horse's nose with them is probably greater. So the 4-knot, I'd stay away from them. They usually cost more too, so you're paying for something you don't even need. So anyhow, we'll move on down to the arena and conclude this, and that'll be our talk about halters for today. Later. Okay, got our faithful little assistant here helping us out here. Talk a couple more things about halters, is especially on the cheaper ones, because they tend to get them from different suppliers a lot. The consistency isn't always there, and you got to really watch how they fit, where they put the knots. A couple of things that are important is make sure that this side piece is nowhere near the eye. If you get a halter like that that's way up here, when you pull on this one way or the other, you can see that shifts a little bit. And you can, if it's too close to the eye, you can inadvertently end up poking the horse in the eye with the rope, and that can end badly. If you get a halter that fits like that, just throw it out. Don't even, unless you can take it back and get your money back, but certainly do not use it. The other thing you got to watch is in here in the fit. You can see there's a fair bit of room in there, and that's necessary because otherwise the horse cannot move its jaw with a halter on. And although you don't normally want your horse eating and grazing and that sort of thing, but there's a perfect example right there. I may have missed it, but as you can see, when she yawns, her jaw actually comes down enough that she needs every bit of room that's in that halter. So you actually have to have some room in there. It took me a while to figure out why rope halters fit so sloppy like that, but that's why. They actually need the room to move the horse, move their mouth. So watch these pieces. Make sure that it overall sits nicely on the horse. You don't want this nose piece way down because I've actually seen them where if the halter wasn't tied up tight enough one day on somebody else's horse, and the horse rubbed on something, it actually pulled the noseband right off its nose. So it doesn't need to be strangling tight or anything, but a good fit is nice. But one other story I forgot I was going to share, and it goes along with be careful what you buy. Don't get conned into something that isn't really any better than something else. I think it was the day I bought this halter. I was in the store and they had a fairly good selection of halters there. And hanging right next to this one was another one with a little cardboard tag on it, and it said natural horsemanship halter. I looked at it. The gauge of it was the same. There was no difference at all in the quality of the rope that I could tell. I mean, maybe there was, but diameter was about the same, stiffness was about the same. Didn't look like there was a darn thing different other than color. I believe the rope was a different color on that one. But the other one was double the price of this one, just because somebody put a little cardboard tag on it that said natural horsemanship. So it didn't even have a brand name on it other than that. So, I mean, that's a big red flag. It wasn't even a reputable company or anything like that. It was just somebody put a cardboard tag on it, said natural horsemanship halter, and they charged twice as much for it. So don't be conned by scams like that. Sometimes you get what you pay for, and sometimes you're just paying for a con. So just be careful. I'm not saying that expensive ones are bad. Sometimes you definitely do get your money's worth. I know, like I mentioned in another video when I was talking about my farrier's tools, you get what you pay for. I bought the best because I don't believe in buying junk when it comes to tools. And halters are a little bit different, but there are other things like my cinch that I have. That's a safety item. You need a good quality cinch. Don't cheap on that. I actually have one. It's a good brand name. It's a Weaver. It was not cheap. Not their fault. Right, they're made in the U.S. and the exchange rate between Canada and the U.S. is not very good right now. So some of their stuff is rather pricey. But that's one company that I can say nothing bad about. They do make some very good quality products. And like I said, a good quality cinch, it's important for the comfort of the horse. It's also a safety issue because the last thing you want is to have something like that break. So, it all depends on what it is. Halter, no, you don't have to go out and buy a really expensive one. Something like a cinch, though, no, don't cheap out on that. But anyhow, this isn't about cinches. This is about halters. But I just thought I'd run through that with you. And like I said, cost is not necessarily an assurance of quality. I'll give you another little comparison. Is boots. I have had $35 boots that lasted twice as long as my $150 boots. So what you pay doesn't necessarily determine, if somebody made this thing out of decent quality rope, it's going to last a long time. If it's made out of crap, it's going to fall apart. So, it's hit and miss. And, sometimes buying something from a, reputable manufacturer is not a bad idea. But again, price is not an assurance of quality, and you do not have to spend a lot of money on them. And like I said, because of the reasons that I listed before, losing them, giving them away, and things like that, I don't like spending a lot of money on halters. I don't think that's necessary. Unfortunately, if you aren't real careful when you shop, you could end up getting junk and end up actually in the long run spending a lot more by buying cheap ones. So there you go, a little bit more on halters. Have a good day.